There we go. And we are.
Good morning, Matt Waldman. It's week 8 is almost in the books. We've got a Monday night game, Giants and Steelers, and poor Justin Fields sounded like he was going to get a little work tonight and then tweaked his hamstring. We'll see how that all plays out and how the Giants play out.
Or did he really?
Or did he really? Is Mike Tomlin just okey doking the hell out of us? We don't know. Pretty exciting week of football. Like the games were exciting. I don't know if it was great football, but the games seemed to be in doubt right at the last month. By the way, hi, I'm Bob Harris. Damn glad to meet you. You can find me on the X Machine at Football Diehard. He's Matt Waldman. You can find him at Matt Waldman. Also find him at the Matt Waldman RSP, mattwaldman.com and mattwaldmanrsp.com. What's the difference between those?
It evolved in a fucked up sort of way, and we're going to get that fixed down the line. But mattwaldman.com is where you can buy the book.
You can find us both.
Yes. Is where you can find the content, and it'll lead you to mattwaldman.com. So
that's the deal. There. So you get the same place. And you can find us both at Football Guys every week doing all kinds of incredible content, some of which we might talk about today. But we're also going to talk about some things that happened, and we'll start with the Chicago Bears. Matt Eberflus and the Bears offensive staff, they aren't doing Caleb Williams any favors. Feel it or fuck it.
Kind of feeling that.
I feel that. So I want to say, let me frame it a little bit.
All right.
Like, were you at least slightly encouraged that they made adjustments in the fourth quarter that seemed to work?
I was encouraged that Caleb Williams had to play Superman in the fourth quarter to get those things to happen, because the average rate of pressure and the average time he had to throw weren't all that strong. They were pretty rough. So there's some formations that are kind of questionable that I think that I can't spend a lot of time to go into it right now, but there's some formations that look a little questionable. What did kind of really tick me off was you're at the goal line and you have DeAndre Swift, you have Rashawn Johnson, you had Khalil Herbert, but you decided to make him inactive because I guess you're going to try and trade him. I don't know what you're going to do with that. You had a bunch of people that you could probably hand the ball who would probably be reasonably good to hand the ball to, and you hand it to a guard who has no experience taking handoffs in a pro game, and you fumble the ball away.
That's
that.
Like, are we putting too much emphasis on this? Like, so we'll just say, whatever Dan Quinn's been doing on defense had not been working greatly. It worked this week. They got a lot of pressure on Williams. That was a big deal. And if if Washington starts playing defense, people, I don't know what y'all are going to do. So for me, I think the last thing you said is they just got too cute times 10, right? Like, why do you make that play? Why do you call that play? What do you have confidence in? I think to me, that's the big concern. Let's go to the bigger question. Can the talent on hand overcome that for our purposes?
I think it's always going to be limited, because I think at its best, if you had nothing to overcome, Rome Odunze might be a top 5 rookie receiver in this class. Just if they were able to get him the ball the way that they should be able to get him the ball. If Caleb Williams, but a big part of it too is just personnel and some personnel weaknesses. So you can probably criticize the staff and the scheme, and there's some issues there. But at the heart of it, if the offensive line was protecting Caleb Williams reasonably well, maybe we wouldn't be criticizing the offensive scheme quite as much, because some of those things might have worked a little bit better. So, I'm going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into this probably in the coming weeks, but I would say that, based on what we've seen, there are key moments in a game that you just don't get too cute with, and what they did at the goal line, that's about as close to inexcusable as I'm going to say something is inexcusable. That was how bad that was. Now that said,
that was bad, and fuck that.
Yeah, but I will say this, just for your benefit, Bob. You'll be interested in hearing this. It was really fun watching Jayden Daniels play football on Sunday. With the ribs, You know, he had one of the more one of the prettier throws I saw all day, layering it between defenders. You know, in the intermediate range up the left flat. You know, that Hail Mary was something else in terms of just him buying time to be able to get his teammates in position to be able to execute it to perfection, because you always want a guy in front, you want a guy in back of that whole area that you're going to throw it to, and they were able to tip it behind them, and Noah Brown had a great catch, you know, an easy catch to be able to make
by himself,
you know, just all by himself there. So it was you know, the last time I saw something like that, I think it was Billy White Shoes Johnson on a play in Atlanta, where he was the guy in front and the ball got tipped forward and he was able to catch it and take it in from about 5 yards out. So, I mean, it was a thrilling game. It was horrific for the Bears fans just because, you know, it was rough for Caleb all game, and then he was able to piece some things together in a manner that, you know, he had some really nice throws in that game too. So I think anybody who wants to make the comparison between these two guys, it's like basically comparing apples, where one is in a glass jar that they take out with, you know, white gloves and they present it on the table, and the other is in a factory filled with mallets that are like hammering down on a conveyor belt as the apples being blown down on the conveyor belt. It's just apples, you know. That's the difference there. So I would just tell Michael Irvin, you were a great receiver, but stay, you know, you're doing a great job, you know, basically with the hot takes this week. You know, you definitely should get a bonus for talking about who that the Bears are upset that they don't have Jayden Daniels and regret it. I would say that's that one was, you should handle that with like gloves in a steel factory. You know how hot that thing was.
Right. Well, let's go ahead and throw a banana in the mix here. Anthony Richardson came up small, right? Again, you know, like, so all the leagues where I waited until round 11 and got to Jayden Daniels, I'm faring reasonably well. All the leagues where I went all in on Anthony Richardson, less so. Sure. So watching yesterday's game was painful, especially watching Jayden Daniels after the game added to my misery. I still feel like at some point I'm going to get more out of Anthony Richardson. I felt like there was, you know, Tyler Goodson's drop pass in the end zone. Josh Downs was a step away from having another touchdown. But what, and the tapping out is going to bother people, right? Whether it should or not, it is. Just like him getting tired of a couple of running plays and then getting up and coming on out of the game. That surprised me. Anyway, what is the problem? Is Anthony Richardson's wide receivers more of a problem, or is Anthony Richardson the problem?
I would say, you know, he was 10 of 32. And I know that on Twitter they showed 8 passes where you could argue that they were mishandled in some way. So you could argue that they were arguing that he was more like 18 for 32, which is a little bit more in line with his, you know, close to 60% completion percentage. I would say that 8 is being generous, more generous than it should have been. After watching the tape this morning, there were 5 passes out of those 8 that should have been caught. Okay. And I'm not counting some plays that other people would say should have been caught. I think I'm being fair with that they were either dropped or the receiver was not in the right position to go up and get the ball, and the ball was placed more than well enough for that to happen. So you're looking at really 15 for 32, probably would have been closer to 250, 275 yards as a result of those 15 for 32. And there were 3 missed opportunities for touchdowns on those plays. Those, you know, and there are different drives. There was one that people keep saying that there was a throw to Goodson, and the play before that there was a throw to Pittman, and they both should have been touchdowns, and that was, one play after the other. I'm talking about there was a pass interference that was, I would argue, was incidental contact with Michael Pittman based on the break of his route that they called and nullified after Richardson literally split 3 defenders in the pocket to buy time to get that. But so I would say more than not, Anthony Richardson did enough to win this game, and we would have, and if those worked out, I would say that we would have been looking back at this game and saying there's some missed throws that he made. There was an interception that was a missed read, and he could have played, and his placement could have been better. But I don't think that we would be talking about it as a disaster the way people look at the box score or listen to talk radio and maybe have, heard some hothead talk about it in that fashion.
Right.
It's a combination,
like
but
the
more the receivers.
31.3% completion percentage. 31.3% completion percentage, the second lowest by any player with 30-plus pass attempts over the last 10 seasons. The only player worse was Josh Allen, also this season, also in Houston. He completed 30%. So I don't know if there's any correlation there. But we'll see. I keep thinking every game I watch him, we're about 2 plays from having an entirely different conversation about him. So I'm trying not to get too down, but obviously we're not.
I'll just say one last thing about this.
We're not going to get the investment.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say one last thing about this is, you're right. From a fantasy perspective, it's a bust right now for him. But I would also say that from a development standpoint, I'd tell people to relax a bit, because you may look at previous, players who are at this particular statistical standing, I guess, from the past, and you might make comparisons that might say that he's, in bad shape. But I would also say that really, when you have unusual players with unusual athletic talent, they tend to be players who test things in unusual ways, and their risks are higher. So comparing, like, say, him to Bubby Brister is probably not a good example. Comparing him to John Elway, who was also on a list of players that you would fit within this realm, is probably a better example. You want to use archetypes when you make these statistical comparisons. And the archetypes are players like Josh Allen, Cam Newton, Lamar Jackson, John Elway, and those, Brett Favre. Those are probably the players you want to look at and say, all right, how did they do in their first 9 to 10 games? And then and based on what we're seeing statistically, he's on par. This was a bad game, but we looked at Lamar, and that was the same way.
Generally speaking, for our purposes, I mean, you're not getting what you want out of him. If you haven't been forced to drop him, I'm not dropping him. I'm at the point where I'm not going to play him until I start to see a turnaround. That means I'm likely going to miss a huge breakout game at some point, right? Because he's going to have those. Also, though, I'm just mindful of at some point, maybe he emerges and starts playing better with a little more consistency there. The schedule might be easing up a little bit for him. And maybe things get a little, the pathways become a little clearer. And maybe I still get that league-winning upside. I might have ended up overpaying for it. But if I get it at the end of the season, am I going to care? No. So I'm not going to mind overpaying for it at all. So and quit tapping out.
No, I think that makes sense. I'm not even worried about that. I mean, we'd rather see players throw up on the field. I think that's probably what people would prefer to see. But I mean, seriously,
old man sensibilities.
It is the old man sensibilities. And again, we literally were 5 passes away from this being a 4-touchdown day, and probably should have been a 4-touchdown day for him. So there's a thin line between great and terrible, and that thin line was receivers dropping balls that they shouldn't have.
We saw that. Speaking of the thin line, in Cleveland, we've now seen both sides of the coin. Jameis Winston threw for 334 yards against the Baltimore Ravens. Deshaun Watson hadn't had 200 passing yards all season. Last time he threw for 300 yards was January of 2021. So Jameis Winston's play further indicts the Browns executives for incompetence. Feel it or fuck it, Matt Waldman. I feel like I'm setting this up for something.
Look, as a Browns fan, I don't see a thin line at all. That was a big fucking thick line that said, here's how you're smart and here's how you're a fucking idiot, or here's how you are your egos are so fragile that you would put this guy as your, emergency backup so that you didn't have to hear your fans chant his name, because they all knew. And even if your players are somewhat defensive about it, they all knew that you put this burden on this franchise when you basically when you paid all this shit ton of money for Deshaun Watson and his problems. And I'm not saying that, Winston's had his own problems too that are related in this area for sure. But I would say that, that played out before. That's played out before they brought him in. And I would say if you're going to, if we're going to look at it in that cold, calculated way, at least Winston's problems are over, whereas Watson's problems seem to still be in the middle of it all when they were courting him. And it's weighed on them. But Winston looks great. He's a bit of a reckless player at times, but I would call him more, he's evolved to daring. His footwork continues to look better like it did in New Orleans. They're able to use more drops from center and expand the offense. He's targeting a wealth of players and doing it successfully. His placement looks strong. And while the Ravens don't have a great defense, they can get pressure on you, and they can be disruptive. And he had a good game.
But they also give up the most passing yards in the NFL.
Yes,
they had multiple injuries in the secondary. I don't want to get too carried away with it, but thinking this is not better, fuck that. It's better. Right? Yeah, we all knew this. This is like all the things you look at in your daily life that are objective truths. People are telling you, oh no, not that. Look, move along. Nothing to see here. Deshaun Watson's fine. No, he wasn't fine. It wasn't working.
Snowflakes. There are snowflakes in Cleveland in terms of the brass there. If we're going to use the term snowflake, we should put in the dictionary, not any political stuff. We should literally put the Cleveland Browns executive staff for being snowflakes and their fragile little egos about sunk cost fallacies.
So looking at that game, Cedric Tillman, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, David Njoku all seem to be in play for fantasy managers. Is that too much to reach? By the way, Tillman target shares 25 and 22% over his last two games without Amari Cooper. That's a total of 47 fantasy points over that 2-game span. JJ Zachariason pointed out this morning, Cooper has scored 43.6 points across the previous 5 games with the Browns. So that tells you a little bit of the trajectory this is going. Is this a sustainable thing? Let me ask you this. Is this sustainable? And are all those guys viable options in fantasy play?
They're viable options right now until we see how that's going to settle. But what you want to look at really is who are going to be the best matchup options. And considering that the Chargers, the Saints, are kind of vulnerable defenses, but then after that they get a run of Pittsburgh, Denver, Pittsburgh again, and then the Chiefs, and then they get a reprieve with Cincinnati and Miami in the final 2 weeks of the season. What that's probably going to tell you is that Njoku remains the guy. Just stick with David Njoku as the safest guy. I would say after that, the highest floor guy is probably Elijah Moore, because he's the player that's going to, benefit the most from the slot and get some manufactured touches as well as some zone looks. Tillman has the highest ceiling, but also has probably the second lowest floor because he is an inexperienced receiver in terms of the pros. So he's going to have his ups and downs. And then if Steve Smith thinks Jerry Jeudy is soft, well, you probably understand who has the mid or meh ceiling and a low floor. And I would say Judy's probably the biggest variable of the four guys there.
All right, let's hit some of these quickly. National Tight End Day was a great success. Adam Trautman was part of that. Is he a for real fantasy option for the Denver Broncos? Feel it or fuck it?
I'm going to say feel it because I have a soft spot for this guy from scouting him. He's a very good athlete. He's a decent route runner. Sean Payton stuck by him since he got him in New Orleans.
Right. That's the key.
And you see some of the athletic ability on display with what he was able to do. So I think there's a chance for there to be a comfort level. And he's only, fourth year in the league, fifth year in the league. Tight ends can take a little bit of time. He came from a really small school. So I think there's a chance here you might be able to get a discount on a good tight end.
Yeah, again, National Tight End Day might have skewed things for everybody. It seemed like all they did was score touchdowns on the day, but good for them. This is a present to you, Matt Waldman. I saw Chris Brooks. I saw him running for the Green Bay Packers. Is he making a move up the depth chart?
I think he is. If you look at the difference between how they're using him and how often they used him, he's getting a little bit more play than Emmanuel Wilson. I think they like what they see enough that he even got some 2-minute drill stuff, even though Emmanuel Wilson was the one who got more of the opportunities in that capacity. The fact that Chris Brooks is kind of imposing himself in that role a little bit, even on a small level, tells you that they foresee Chris Brooks maybe being their number 2 back down the stretch here, and that they're going to give him a chance to continue to compete for it. So I think it's going to happen.
At least the direct backup to Josh Jacobs, and maybe there's still some room for other players there to have kind of ancillary roles. But I'll give you your Chris Brooks log. Jalen Coker, Panthers wide receiver. Is he a fantasy free agent gem? Feel it or fuck it?
I'm gonna say fuck it. He had a nice. Listen, he made a nice catch, and I think he's a good contested catch player. But I still think the routes and the offense may preclude him from being a consistent force. I think I want to watch a little bit more before I, reserve the right to change my mind here on this one. But I would say from what I've seen thus far, I'd say he had a better game than he's going to have a season.
Correct. I think that's right. So, just looking at it objectively, Titans have scored 120 points. The only team that's played 8 games with fewer points than the Panthers, 124. And a bunch of that points came with Andy Dalton, and they're still not good. The only team, the Giants haven't played yet. They're at 99. But here's the rule of thumb. When mining a bad offense, skim at the surface, people. Don't dig deep. And Jalen Coker's too deep for me. On the other hand, Christian Kirk done for the year. Is it Parker Washington season?
It could be, yes. Parker Washington has good rapport with, Trent Richardson. So funny. With Trevor Lawrence. I was thinking about Trent Richardson today. With Trevor Lawrence. And, he's a good underneath receiver. He's a good contested catch player. He's got skills after the catch. He's kind of like a Hines Ward type of, aspiring Hines Ward type of player. And I think that he can, it's a little bit of a process of elimination scenario. And last man standing kind of thing, but you're probably going to see more 2 tight end sets with Brenton Strange and Evan Ingram while Kirk is out, because Duvernay's out as well. Gabe Davis looks out. Brian Thomas, with the chest injury. At some point, at least next week, Parker Washington has a really strong chance of good production in the coming weeks. I still think that he still could wind up being maybe a wide receiver 4 for you, wide receiver 3, maybe even with certain matchups.
I'll say our guy Dempsey in Jacksonville engineered a trade with me about a week ago to land Parker Washington. I'm pretty sure his thought was Christian Kirk was going to be traded. This is essentially that. And so he thinks there's a little bandwidth there for him. We'll see. The Jaguars passing attack doesn't thrill me all that much. Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, third touchdown in his many week, makes him a fantasy option. Feel it or fuck it.
Fuck it. Even if he has a fourth or fifth one, once Will Levis comes back, I think we're not going to see that anymore. I think it's just a rapport with Mason Rudolph. Or as soon as Mason Rudolph says something inflammatory that makes somebody like, Myles Garrett want to hit him again with a helmet, that might be over. He might do it with his own teammates. Who knows? No, but seriously.
Did I mention the 120 points? The league low for our teams that have played 8 games.
Right. Yeah. Skim the surface. That's Calvin Ridley, folks. Yeah.
I will say JJ Zach Reason pointed out Westbrook-Ikhine led the Titans in routes run against the Lions. So, but also, as JJ said, absolutely crushed it for me in my hyphenated names only league. I think that's where you're playing Westbrook-Ikhine in your hyphenated only leagues. Good line, JJ. DeAndre Hopkins is gone there, though. Will he be a fantasy factor in Kansas City before Thanksgiving? Feel that or fuck it?
I think that's the over-under with this because on the one hand, he is one of the great veteran receivers in the league. And as Drew Brees kind of pointed out last week in an interview with Colin Cowherd, at least that's what Joe Bryant told me because I know he's a big fan of Cowherd. He was talking about how I saw how Brees was saying the report when you're a veteran quarterback and you have a veteran receiver, the rapport should be pretty quick. Like you've watched those guys enough to know what they're about, and and it should come together pretty quick. But the thing is Andy Reid's offense seems to be a big obstacle to every receiver who comes into it, unless you're a veteran. But Juju did pretty well his first year there as a veteran returning to it. So I'm gonna say, yeah, it's gonna be the under. He's gonna be fantasy relevant before Thanksgiving. If that's
I did too. I'm banking on the roll. Like we saw what Rashee Rice did with that spot and that role and the targets that came and where the targets
came. You think he's gonna be a screen player? You think?
I think he's playing that spot. And I think like we saw it with Juju come in. I think not necessarily. By the role, I mean the workload, right?
Okay.
The 8 to 12 targets, maybe catch 7 of them, wherever they come. I think there's room in that offense in that passing attack for that role, and it's a necessary role. And I think he provides something some of the other players there don't, which is the ability to push off so well that he's rarely intercepted. And for playing with a quarterback who went into this week tied for the most interceptions in the NFL, that's probably a handy skill. I think he'll be a popular target with one Patrick Mahomes. But I'm with you. I think he'll be a factor more so than he is ever going to be in Tennessee for sure. Cade Otton, currently I think you're tight end 6. Kyle Pitts, currently you're tight end 4. Who's the better option of the rest of the season?
Kyle Pitts. Not Kyle Pitts. Excuse me, Cade Otton. Cade Otton is the better option, and it's one due to opportunity, because of the receiving core and the weaknesses with the receiving core. 2, because he has a true rapport with Baker Mayfield. 3, they work him open on looks that whether you have good receivers or veteran evolved receivers or not, they're finding him open looks in a way that they're not doing with Kyle Pitts. And then 3, I would say he's a more versatile player than Kyle Pitts, so you're going to see him as a blocker more often, which leads to play action passes that also is another way of opportunities for him to get open and make big plays. And 4, I guess I would say he's a more consistent player than Kyle Pitts is right now, who may not be the athlete Pitts is after the catch, but he is a really flexible, maneuverable player with the ball in the air and makes tight coverage plays. And I think that Pitts is a guy that I value his talent, and I think in the right fit could really be, continue to be good. And I think that he's going to be good enough to start this year for them, but I think Otton has the higher upside.
Yeah, I thought that. I think that's an interesting way to look at it, and I tend to agree with it. I think there'll be fewer ups and downs. It'll be more even production for Cade Otton, and so like I spend about 15 hours either on the air or on the interweb answering questions and going back and forth. Got a lot of questions on the Buccaneers receiving core going into last week. Which is the right guy? And pretty much my answer was Cedric Tillman throughout most of that. But that aside. How did
Cedric Tillman make it down south?
Well, he didn't, but I think the my point was I don't know if any of them are the right answer, right?
I like
so that when I watched the game, I said probably none of them are the right answer except what about this Rakim Jarrett guy? Maybe he's the right answer. What do you think? Feel it or fuck it, Rakim Jarrett. Any value?
I'm kind of feeling it. I liked Rakim Jarrett out of Maryland. You know, he was kind of a Stephon Diggs starter kit with some of the pieces missing. He's physical. He's a good special teams player. Goes up and wins the ball. Good after the catch. And he made some clutch plays yesterday. He was really the only guy. He had I think 3 really big catches that they needed. They weren't pretty in terms of how he did it technically, but he was effective. And he's made some plays last year, even as a rookie. I think he's one of those guys that they just can't seem to keep off the field in some capacity when he's healthy. And he hasn't been on the field this year because he wasn't healthy. So I think there's something there. Doesn't mean that you're gonna. I look at it like the Jalen Coker situation right now with a wary eye. Don't come ask me about should I be dropping X for Rakim Jarrett. No, just keep an eye on Rakim Jarrett and you'll know when you need to add him.
Right. But I think going back to the mining analogy, if you're mining deeper, do it on offenses where they score a shit ton of points. And that would be the
good advice.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where Baker Mayfield playing with a great deal of intestinal fortitude at this point in time. Sean Tucker, can we fold up our dreams and aspirations?
Yeah, we can probably fold it up for now. I mean, we see that the touches are going White and Irving's way, and White's making enough of those touches that you can see that he's not going to lose his job. You know, this is that classic over-under reaction that people have about backs when they see the box score and they don't like what they see.
For sure.
You know, so is he a great back? No, but he's good enough that he's not going to lose his job to Tucker unless an injury happens and Tucker gets enough touches to explode again.
All right, let me throw out the hot take of the day here. Alvin Kamara would be every bit as good as Christian McCaffrey if he played in San Francisco. Feel it or fuck it.
Feel it. Absolutely feel that. He is an excellent receiver. I think he is as good of a runner as Christian McCaffrey. I think he's a better tackle breaker than Christian McCaffrey. And I would have loved to seen him in that Shanahan offense. And he's kind of languishing in Saints land right now. But he wants to retire a Saint. He wants to stay a Saint. He's saying all the right things. And I admire the kid, you know. So, yeah, fantastic player.
I 100% agree with this. 100% agree with this. And had expectations coming in when Clint Kubiak showed up that this would be a great year. It started off hot as fire. It's been serviceable since, even in a horrible offense. You know, that's like once Taysom Hill's gone, nothing works there apparently. Also, Derek Carr. So let's round it out to this. Jake Haener, is he out? Also, Derek Carr being gone has been a factor because Spencer Rattler has not been great. Is Jake Haener better?
Yeah, he is. And I thought he showed it yesterday too. I mean, I think Spencer Rattler has had his development's not going to be linear like most quarterbacks. So he's going to have up and down weeks, and he didn't have a great week in a lot of respects. But Haener's a guy that may not have the arm and may not have the mobility that people covet, but he has just enough of both and enough of what really is important right here in between the ears that I think that he could be a good backup who's startable at times, and I think we saw a little bit of a bit of that. The one thing he did that made me laugh and go, you know what's a good sign of a good young quarterback? They target the fuck out of a guy like Chris Olave when they get into the game. You know, they don't mess around with the ancillary pieces. They target the guy who's the best player on the field. And I thought, yeah, see, sometimes common sense is a good thing.
Well, and they do it without getting that guy killed.
Yeah. Yes. That's
I mean, that's been a little bit of a problem for Spencer Rattler. He kind of puts Chris Olave in bad situations at times. I'm with you 100% on this. I'm going to frame this one carefully.
Maybe his last name is a bad name for a quarterback. You know? That's all I'm saying. All right, anyway,
well, better than Rattold. Yeah. Yeah, I want to frame this one carefully. Kendre Miller, his fantasy future depends on Dennis Allen getting fired. Feel it or fuck it.
No, fuck that. I would say that Dennis Allen's been giving him tough love, and I think that it's kind of working. I think that we're starting to see him play well, and we're seeing something emerge here. I don't think it was always there with him. I think the talent was always there, but I think that he was getting pushed a little bit in the media, and maybe it was justified, even though there were some people who were saying that you know, Allen was being an old curmudgeon and maybe not being fair about it. But I'm starting to beg to differ.
I think he got hurt again in this game. He had to leave with a hamstring injury. That's been Dennis Allen's sore spot with him, his availability.
That would stink.
So a bit of concern. He's missed, 15 games so far in his career. 9 last year, 6 so far this year. Another injury in this game. So that's my concern for him, is that Dennis Allen at some point is going to sour on him. I do believe the tough love has been there because we've seen it, because he's made no bones about, I believe he actually went to the cliche phrase, you don't make the team in the tub. So this summer. So hopefully, look, injuries are bad luck, not like somebody's out there trying to get hurt, but I think that could be an issue for Kendre Miller. Okay, here we go. Kimani Vidal looks like a future starter. Feel or fuck it?
I'm feeling it. I think he's just on the edge of saying that about him. He's on that Mason-Dixon line, but I think there's enough there that, yeah, we could call him a future starter. But at the same time, I get worried that I see some Tim Hightower vibes, which means that he's a future journeyman starter for parts of seasons. But I think there's more there.
Like to see him break a run for more than 7 yards at some point.
Yep.
I'm asking too much, it seems. All right. Last one here. Running back by committee was told to go fuck itself this week.
I think it was told to go fuck itself this year. I think my favorite thing about fantasy football this year is that I could literally recommend this summer. It's old school drafting time. We're drafting running backs in the first 2 rounds, and we're doing it early, and there's a shit ton of them that are going to have a chance to be bell cows, and they have been. So running back by committee has been told to go fuck itself by the NFL, and I think it's fabulous. And I would take more of this. I would take more. As somebody who started playing this game in 1986, when that's all there was no such thing as committees at running back. It was a glorious era, and I would like to see us get closer even still to that, because there's teams out there that haven't got the message. I'm looking at you, Tampa Bay. I'm looking at you. Yeah, I get that. But they had, when they finally put Sean Tucker in for a little bit longer, they might get that message, but it won't happen with Bucky Irvin in there. Bucky Irvin's played very well. So, but yeah, I mean, it is. And as someone who's been a proponent of, drafting wide receivers early and tight ends and quarterbacks early and letting the running backs go to the mid rounds, what do they call that? Oh, zero RB, upside down drafting,
That's what they call that.
Take them where they're not.
Upside down drafting is what I heard way back in the day.
Yeah,
way back in the day.
Or draft them where they ain't, or whatever Paul Charchian used to say even before me, who was doing it.
Right?
Do the opposite. Do the opposite. That's what he called it. For folks, proponents of even that, it's nice to be able to say, You've got Derrick Henry. You've got Saquon Barkley. They're both on revenge tours. You've got Joe Mixon, who had his own personal revenge tour. There's more guys that even a guy like Josh Jacobs pretty much is getting all the
Yep.
touches there. James Cook, when he's healthy, getting all the touches there.
Aaron Jones, I believe, Thursday night had 100% of the Vikings running back touches in that game.
Yeah.
We call that not a committee, folks.
Yeah. So exactly. I mean, there's a good dozen guys that I think that fit that bill, maybe a little bit more. I think close to half the league, we probably have non-committee situations right now, and it's awesome.
Well, I think we both can agree we feel that. I think we can both agree we fuck our internet connection today.
Yes. I'm like, Bob, did you not have coffee? You're slow as shit. What's going on? And then and you look like everything's in real time, but apparently not.
I don't know. We'll work on that, people. I'm going to go outside and dig up the cable and see what the hell is going on. And then we'll carry on. We'll be back next week for this. In the meantime, you can catch me every morning, 5:30 a.m., the Football Guys Daily Update podcast, 10 minutes, just to get you up to speed on what's going on. My notebooks on Thursday, my polarizing players with Gary Davenport on Friday, the in and out column. You can go read about Cedric Tillman last week. And Bo Nix, among others. Kareem Hunt. I was in on some good ones this week, but not that they were difficult to discern. Matt, the gut check last week I loved because it was Anthony Richardson, and it comforted me greatly, and we covered some of it today. What else you got coming up here?
Certainly the top 10 this week. So I'll be doing some film reviews of a variety of players and situations that have fantasy impact. We'll have another gut check coming out on Wednesday, the Fantasy Roundtable I always moderate, and we'll have our fabulous assortment of Football Guys staff debating topics that I try and, trip them up with. And then, of course, Stir the pot. Yeah, that too. And then the replacements, where, I recommended guys like Nelson Aguilar if you were in a pinch last week. So, and Derike Young is a guy to keep an eye on, but nothing happened yet with that. But, I keep a running list of guys that you can take a look at that if you're in a pinch on Friday, Saturday, and you're like, I need something off the waiver wire that can get me points, I'm your guy.
You're always my guy, Matt Waldman. I love you. Goodbye.
Goodbye. I love you too.
That was horrible. I don't know what